5 of chapter 2 here, I believe. Part 5, Kwan, heroine of the Independence Army. When I was back in Fusang, after leaving Hwasong U6 school, there were fewer independence champions who visited my home than before. The house was quiet and lonely, whereas it had been alive with people day and night before. One strong impression I got in Fusang concerned Ri Kwanrin. After the death of my father, she came to stay with us. I'm told that old Tong Jing said to her, as he sent her to our home, "You are greatly indebted to Mr. Kim. In view of this, go to Fusang and help Song Ju's mother." Ri Kwan Rin kept my mother company while working for the South Manchurian Women's Education Federation. She was a bold woman with an optimistic disposition. She was attractive, bold, and of firm character, and had both literary and military accomplishments. The likes of her was rarely found in Korea in those days. When dressed in a man's uniform, she rode a boat on horseback. People she passed would look at her with curiosity, as if she came from another world. Because in those days, women used to go about with their faces veiled, in accordance with feudal custom. But back in Fusang, I found her looking less lively than before. She was surprised to learn that I had left Hwasong U6 school. She wondered why I had given up the officer training school, which young people were anxious to attend. When I told her why I had left the school and how, she said that I had made a courageous decision. And she gave her support to me in my determination to leave for Jilin. Nevertheless, she could not hide her sadness. The fact that I had rejected and broken away ideologically from the school that was under nationalist influence seemed to make quite an impact on her. On seeing the change in my life, the sensitive Ri Kwan Rin seemed to have felt more keenly the demise of the Independence Army and nationalism. Mother said that she had changed greatly and had recently become more taciturn and subdued. At first, I simply attributed this to the mental agony that was usual for unmarried women of her age. She was then 28 years old. In those days, early marriage prevailed. So, ladies 14 or 15 years old wearing their hair done up. In those days, if a girl was said to be 28 years old, people would shake their head and say that she was too old to marry. It was very likely that old maidens like Ri Kwanrin would suffer mental agony over the question of marriage. She often looked moody, so one day I asked her why she was looking so thin and gloomy. Leaving a sigh, she said, "The years pass, but things are no better. That's why I'm gloomy. When your father was alive, I could easily walk 25, even 50 miles a day. Whatever I do since your father's death, I don't feel elated. Even the pistol I carry is likely to rust. The trouble is that I find no mental support anywhere. The Independence Army no longer seems effective. Its situation is utterly wrecked. The old leaders only put on airs and do not report for work. I can't understand what they are thinking about. Strong fighting men enjoy a family life, and the unmarried men chase women. One agile man with fighting spirit married a few days ago and left the Independence Army to go to Jindao. They all copy one another and flee. It is inevitable that when men reach a certain age, they get married. However, if they throw away their rifles to get married, who will fight for national independence? I don't know why they behave so shamelessly. Unquote. Then I understood her mental agony and then I understood her mental agony and indignation. She, without marrying, was making strenuous efforts for the independence movement, whereas able bodied men were fleeing for safety, throwing away their rifles. This had roused her resentment. When educated girls acted like modern women following the trend of civilization, Kwan, carrying a pistol, fought bravely against the Japanese soldiers and police, crossing and recrossing the river Emnock. I think of the instances of a woman dressed in man's uniform and carrying a pistol, becoming a powerful soldier and fighting this foreign enemy, are few in the history of Korea. Because I feel this to be important, I have covered her story under a separate title in this book. It was hard to imagine that in Korea, where the old practices of treating women as inferior as men still remained and were, in fact, prevalent, a woman carrying a pistol went to the battlefield. Our women's resistance to the foreign enemy had differed historically in its style and method. But what has always been true is that their resistance, in most cases, has assumed a passive form based on the feudal Confucian view on chastity. Whenever a foreign enemy invaded the country and murdered or harassed our people, the women would conceal themselves deep in the mountains or in temples so as to avoid violation. Those women who failed to hide would resist by killing themselves. During the Japanese invasion of Korea in 1592, the number of women martyrs officially registered is said to have been over 30 times greater than the number of male patriots. Thus, it is clear how much Korean women valued their honor. When Cho Ik-yeon died for his country by fasting on Tsushima Island, his wife is said to have killed herself after mourning for 2 years to share the fate of her husband. From a moral point of view, her act should be regarded as an act of someone loyal to her country and faithful to her husband. But a problem arises. If all choose to die, who will defend the country against the enemy? With the progress of civilization in our country, a change took place in the way of thinking of our women and in their view of life. Rejecting the passive form of resistance to the enemy, such as escape and suicide, our women, together with the men, demonstrated in the face of the bayonets of the Japanese troops and police and threw bombs into the enemy government offices and other public buildings. However, it was perhaps only Ri Kwan Rin who took part in the armed resistance as a woman soldier of the Independence Army. This she did for over 10 years in a foreign country. She was beautiful, so whenever she went, it was a problem for her to get rid of the men who chased her. In light of her looks, scholarly attainments, and family background, she was fully qualified to teach at a school, find a good match, and live well as others did. But she devoted herself entirely to the independence movement. Her father was a landed farmer belonging to the middle class who had a 10-roomed house, though it was straw thatched and several hectares of land and forest in Sakju. When Ri Kwan Rin was 12 years old, she had lost her mother, and 2 years later, her father took a 16-year-old girl as his wife. Ri Kwan Rin could not call a woman only 2 years older than herself her mother. On top of that, her father, who believed strongly in feudal custom, gave no thought to sending her to school. When she was 15 years old, he began looking for a suitable match for her. She had always begged her father to send her to school, envying those who did attend. But as her father refused, she left home at the age of 15. While her father was away from home, she went to the river Amnak. There she placed some of her clothes and shoes beside the ice hole, before setting out for Yuji. There she entered Yangsil School, through the good offices of a distant relative of hers. She attended the school for about 6 months before, with the approach of autumn, sending her father a letter asking him to send her school fees. Her father had been spending his time in tears, thinking that his daughter had drowned in the river. On receiving the letter from his daughter, he was so glad that he immediately went to Yuju. He told his daughter that he would now allow her to study, and that if she had anything to ask him, she would write him that she should write to him at any time. From then on, she studied hard without any worries about her school fees. As she had a fine school record, the school authorities recommended her for the art course at Pyongyang Girls' School. She attended the school for a year or two, and in that time came to know the world. She was admitted into the Korea National Association with my father vouching for her. From then on, she became a fully fledged member of the revolutionary organization and took part in underground activities. It was around this time that she learned about the idea of aim high from my father. That was, of course, Kim Il sung's father's philosophy, and part of what aim high and Marxism-Leninism together formed the basis of the Juche idea, the emergence of it. She secretly worked to absorb comrades from among the pupils of the Pyongyang Girls' High School, Sungsil Middle School, Sungi Girls' School, and Kwangsong High School. One day, she came to Myeongdae on an excursion. At her home, she had a talk with my father and helped my mother in her work. At that time, it was difficult to get to Myeongdae, but in spring, many pupils from Sungsik Middle School, Kwangsong High School, and other schools came there with their lunchboxes to enjoy the fine scenery. When the March 1st popular uprising broke out in Pyongyang, she fought bravely at the head of the demonstrators. When the demonstrations broke up, she took her short rest at her hostel before returning to encourage her schoolmates. When there was a sweeping roundup of the prime movers of the demonstration after its reversal, she joined the independence movement full time, returning to her hometown. It was her decision that she would not return to school until the nation had been saved from ruin. Initially, she managed the general affairs of the Kyungji Youth League that had been formed by Oh Tung-jin. She shot 2 Japanese policemen to death in the homeland and threw their bodies into an ice hole in the river Amnak before going over to Manchuria.
They double-tapped Nazis.
When she had returned to the homeland to raise funds after joining the Independence Army, she had been stopped and examined by the police. She had a pistol in the bundle on her hand, so the situation was critical. Sorry, the pistol was in a bundle on her head. The policeman urged her to undo the bundle. Pretending to unfasten it, she whipped out the pistol, and pointing it at the policeman, she took him into the forest, where she disposed of him. As she frequented the homeland to raise funds, many things happened to her on her journeys. Once she received the task from Oh Tung-jin of touring South Fungyang province to raise funds. During her return to the headquarters in the company of a man from the organization at home, she stayed overnight at Sendawan. There, they were threatened by the members of another armed band from the neighbors. At the time, they were carrying several hundred won with them. The bandits demanded money, firing blank shots with the pistols they produced. Frightened by their threats, the man accompanying her meekly produced the money he kept, but she did not offer them a penny, and instead drove them away. There were many women soldiers among the guerrilla troops when we waged the anti-Japanese armed struggle, but up to the time of Ri Kwan Rin, there had been no such woman in Korea. She was bold and plucky, though she had been a schoolgirl, learning embroidery and sewing in her high school days. Once such newspapers as Tongay Ilbo and Joseon Ilbo published sensational articles about her. Ri Kwan was upright and faithful to her principles. After the March 1st popular uprising, the work to merge the organizations of the independence movement went ahead vigorously in South Manchuria. But the amalgamation did not progress smoothly, because each organization put its own men forward, thus displaying a self centered attitude, and ignored people from other organizations. The merger negotiations always ended without success, because of pointless wrangles and conflicts. My father decided to draw the veterans of the independence movement into the merger work to tide over the difficulties. The first person he marked out for this was Rang Kik-thak. It would not be easy to remove him from under the enemy's surveillance and escort him from Seoul to South Manchuria. After some serious thought, my father chose Ri Kwan Rin as the right person, and he sent her to Seoul, giving her a letter to Rang Kik-thak. Rang Kik-thak had great influence among the nationalists. Born into the family of a scholar of Chinese classics in Pyongyang, he had worked hard to cultivate the anti-Japanese sentiment for independence among the people through his patriotic activities as a journalist and educator. He was famous for the Korean English dictionary he compiled, the first of its kind in Korea, and for his leadership of the campaign for the repayment of the national loan to Japan. He was thrown into prison for several years because of the case of the 105 people, and had a hand in the Sinmin Association, and the Shanghai provincial government as member of the state council, and in the formation of the Koryo Revolutionary Party as chairman. He, together with Ho Tung-jin, formed the organization of Jangyunbu. Because of his record, he was respected by the independence champions, irrespective of their party affiliation. And if you remember that group, Jangunbu, they're the ones who were funding the school that Kim Il Sung went to. When she got to Seoul, Ri Kwon-run was arrested by detectives and thrown into a detention room at the Jungno police station. She was put to terrible torture every day. They tortured her by pouring chili powder up her nose, prickling her flesh around the fingernails with bamboo needles, and hanging her from the ceiling with her arms tied behind her back. Some days they stamped on a wooden board placed across her face, and making her lie on her back on the floor, they kicked, beat, and trampled on her while asking her, "Did you come from China or Russia? Why did you come?" After spraying paraffin over some ash paste on her legs, they threatened to burn her to death. But she did not yield. She shouted at them, "I am a jobless wanderer. I came to Seoul to find a job as a seamstress or a nurse for a rich family. Why do you detain and harass me, an innocent woman like this?" She insisted on her innocence, and after a month, she was released. She was in so bad condition that she could hardly move. But she brought Ring King Thing to Xinjiang. On her arrival to Xinjiang, she was confined to her bed because of the after effects of the torture. Her colleagues nursed her, but her conditions did not improve. So they found an old doctor to treat her. Taking her pulse, he made the absurd diagnosis that she had conceived. It must have been a silly joke that the old doctor played on her, a noted beauty, out of caprice. Dismayed at this, she asked him what he meant. He said that it meant she was pregnant. No sooner had he uttered this than she shouted at him, throwing a wooden pillow at him. "You scoundrel, why do you mock me, a young unmarried woman who is fighting arms in hand for national independence? What do you want to gain by slandering me? Say it again." Frightened at this, the doctor fled without even putting on his shoes. She was so brave that my father frequently entrusted her with important tasks. She did whatever my father asked of her. If she was told to go to Pyongyang or to Seoul, she went. If she was asked to go to an urgent errand, she went. If she was requested to enlighten some woman, she would do so. When my father conducted political work in the household, she often went with him to ensure his personal safety and help in his work. She went to Uju, Kakju, Chosun, Kangji, Pakdong, Huryang, and other northern border areas, the Jiandao area, Sunan Kangdong, Eunril, Jeryong, Haiju, and other areas in West Korea and Gyeongsang province. She covered thousands of miles in her travels. Ri Kwan Yun was the only girl in our country to cross and recross Mount Pektu in those days. She led a soldier's life that was so hard for a woman roaming the dew-sprinkled fields of a foreign country in the golden years of her youth, which she could have spent in the warmest happiness. My heart ached at the sight of her agony over the declining independence movement, the agony of a woman who, carrying two pistols with her, was active throughout the length and breadth of the stormy world with a single-hearted patriotic spirit. When I began my preparations for my journey to Jilin, she said that she, too, wanted to go there, to do something. However, she was unable to fulfill her desire. When I was attending school in Jilin, I met her on 2 or 3 occasions at Sun Jung Do's house. When she asked me to tell her about the situation, I spent a long time telling her about the prospects for a revolution. She said that she liked that what we were doing. Nevertheless, she could not break away from Jung Yun-bu. She belonged to the left faction of the nationalists, who accepted communism but failed to put their ideas into practice. I was sorry to see Ri Kwan Rin agonizing over the decline of the nationalist movement. In the nationalist camp, there were many patriotic-minded people, such as Ri Kwan Rin, who were devoted to the independence movement with no concern to their personal lives. But, having no proper leader, Ri Kwan Rin, a plucky woman who was faithful to her principles, did not know what to do. As the Down with Imperialism Union had only just been formed, she could not join her movement. When I saw Ri Kwan Rin, who was agonizing with no mental support to rely on, although my father had believed in her and brought her up with affection, I lamented at the lack of a genuine leading force for the national liberation movement, which was capable of uniting and leading all the patriotic forces of Korea. Her mental agony made me think that our new generation should work harder for the revolution. I made up my mind to open up as early as possible a new path for enlisting the support of all the patriots, those like Ri Kwan Rin, who were groping about without a proper leader, and usher in a new era of revolution in which all the people who desired national independence could advance, riding the same current. With this determination, I speeded up my preparations for my trip to Jilin. I sought her for half a century since seeing her in Jilin. When we formed active guerrilla units in East Manchuria, there were many women in their 20s in their ranks. I was reminded of Ri Kwan Rin, the heroine of the Independence Army. Whenever I saw the courageous women soldiers who marked a new chapter in the history of national liberation, displaying the same stamina and fighting spirit as the male soldiers. Not knowing her whereabouts, I was anxious to know where she was and what she was doing. Although I made inquiries through many channels, I heard nothing of her whereabouts and what she was doing. After national liberation, I searched Shaku. Yes, this is the story of Kim Il Sung's life. This is literally Kim Il Sung's life story, chat. After national liberation, I searched Sekju her birthplace for her, but I failed to find her. It was the early 1970s that I discovered where she was. After making many inquiries, our comrades from the Party History Institute discovered that she was living in China with her son and her daughter. From among the people who fought alongside Ri Kwan Rin, Kong Young Pak Jin Young, and other people who had embraced communism under the influence of the Down with Imperialism Union opened up a new path with us. They all died heroic deaths worthy of revolutionaries. But Ri Kwan had to abandon the struggle halfway due to the lack of a proper leader to follow. When O Tung-jin was alive, however, she took great pains and walked long distances to implement the line of the proletarian revolution laid down in the Kundun meeting. In the summer of 1927, when I left for Jilin, Ri Kwan Rin and Zhang Chou-ho, along with the other members of the Independence Army, were engaged in enlightening the people in Nadionshan, where they lived in straw-thatched huts and grew potatoes. It seemed that O Tung-jin had made Nadioshan the base for the activities of the Independence Army. But after O Tung-jin was arrested, the activities were abandoned. Among the leftist forces of the nationalist movement, O Tung-jin was the person most inclined towards communism. After the arrest of such a central figure, no one came forward to risk his life to implement the line of the Kundun meeting. Some people with Junggun-bu sympathized with communism, but they were powerless. After the birth of Kikmin-bu, with the amalgamation of the three organizations at the highest levels of the nationalists, rapidly became reactionary, and it became difficult to even utter the word communism. The leaders of Kikmin-bu did not scruple to commit treachery by informing Japanese police of people from the left wing of their nationalist movement who sympathized with communists, or even assassinating them. Ri Kwan Rin had to roam about in search of refuge, subjected to persistent pursuit and threats by the terrorists of Kikmin-bu. Finally, she married a Chinese man and settled down. She was unfortunate in marriage, too, because she could not marry a man who she wanted to marry. Thus, the flower of the Independence Army and the red flower among the green, she who caught the attention of the public, appearing like a lodestar in the desolate land of Manchuria, and struck terror into the enemy, withered away. Figuratively speaking, she was an independence champion who set sail on a lengthy voyage in a wooden boat called nationalism. It was too frail a boat to sail the vast expanse of the rough sea of the anti-Japanese resistance movement for independence. A voyage beset with manifold trials and hardships. Such a boat could not reach the destination of national liberation. Many people set sail on the boat, but most of them gave up without reaching their destination. After they looked out for an opening to earn a living or lead an easy life, pretending to be patriots. Some from the upper levels who allegedly represented the nation became petty bourgeoisie, producing ointments, and others became monks and escaped to the mountains. Those who settled down to a family life or simply earned their living without turning traitor were not so bad. Some independence champions who sailed on the nationalist voyage with Ri Kwan Rin betrayed their country and nation and became the stooges of Japanese imperialists. It was 7 years before Ri Kwan Rin returned to the homeland, having spent more than half a century in a foreign country since her last meeting. I was told that since she was becoming more anxious to return to the homeland. after learning that I was Sung Ju, the son of Mr. Kim Young Jik, to whom she had been attached to in her Independence Army days. If Sung Ju was leading the country, Mr. Kim Hung Jik's idea of building a society where all are equal must have been made the reality, she thought. So she wanted to witness that reality. She wanted to have her body buried in the homeland in which she was born and grew up. The homeland which she used to picture in tears whenever she looked up at the stars in the sky, lying on her back in the vast fields of Manchuria, swept by the cold wind. But unknown to others, she suffered a mental agony for many years before deciding to return to the homeland. She had a son, a daughter, and many grandsons and granddaughters. It was not an easy matter for an old woman in her twilight years to decide to return to her homeland alone, leaving her dear family in the distant foreign country which it would be difficult for her to visit again when she had left it. However, Ri Kwan Rin made up her mind to return to the homeland, even if it meant leaving her family forever. It was a courageous decision no woman can make except a plucky woman like Ri Kwan Rin. If she had not devoted the prime of her life to the country, she could not have made such a courageous decision. Only those who have devoted themselves body and soul to the country, weeping, laughing, and bleeding, can truly realize how dear their homeland is to them. When I met Ri Kwan Rin after her return to the homeland, alone with her gray hair flying, leaving her family in a foreign land, I admired her burning patriotic spirit and her noble view on life. Ri Kwan Rin, who was in her 20s when she had parted from me in Fusang, appeared before me as an 80-year-old gray-haired woman. Of her rosy face, which had attracted everyone, there was no sign. When gray-haired Ri Kwan Rin, who had not told us of her whereabouts, although we had taken serious pains to find her, appeared before me, I was seized with sadness about the cruel world which had kept us apart for more than half a century. We provided her with a house in a scenic spot in the heart of Pyongyang, and with a cook and a doctor in her consideration of her old age. The house was near to the girls' high school she had attended in her girlhood. Kim Jong-il, Secretary for Organizational Affairs, chose a house in the spot in consideration of her feelings. Secretary Kim Jong-il went to her house and saw to it that the furniture was arranged to her liking, and the lighting and heating equipment was properly installed. Though infirm with age, she made a kitchen garden in front of her house and planted some maize there. She wanted to prepare food for maize with her own hands and treat me to it, since I had very much enjoyed corn on the cob in my childhood. Even after half a century's time, she still remembered my likes and dislikes. When she was living in Fusang in summer, she used to buy and cook corn on the cob as a treat for my brothers. In consideration of the service she had rendered to the homeland and nation in her youth, after her death, we held a grand funeral for her and buried her remains in the Patriotic Martyrs Cemetery. Wherever they may live in the world, those who truly love their country and nation will visit their homeland, where they were born and where their forefathers' graves lie. Even those with different views, when parting, will someday meet again and share their feelings with each other. That brings us to the end of chapter 2.